Welcome back to the JustBeCos Podcast, a podcast about all things life and cosplay. And today we've got a very special guest, recording all the way from overseas this time, actually. They are an Aussie, but you would have seen them around, whether you do cosplay, whether you're an idol, whether you're into wrestling, whether you're into music, you would have seen them. This is the man who needs no introduction. Thank you for joining us today, Ladybeard. Thank you very much.
JustBeCos Podcast, thrilled to be here, dear friends. My friend Jeremy in the hot seat. You got your headphones, you got your microphone, you got your small blue cat attached to it. We are ready to tear this thing apart, dear friends all over the world. How are you, bro?
Fantastic. Thank you so much for asking. I don't think anyone else actually asked me that on the podcast before, so I appreciate that. Yeah.
Selfish guests not thinking about the interviewer. Unbelievable.
Well, thank you very much for. Look, we're gonna vibe back and forth. That's the plan for the next hour or so.
No worries.
Now, look,
Happy to be.
I'm sure that anyone listening in knows everything about you, but for the ones who don't, because they've been living under a rock, could you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, no problem. Hello, dear friends. My name's Ladybeard. I'm originally from Adelaide, but I now live in Tokyo, Japan, where I'm a cross-dressing pro wrestler and heavy metal singer. You might ask yourself, what did he say? How did that happen? Here's what happened when I was 14 years old. I went to a school uniform party, and I thought it'd be really funny to wear my big sister's school dress, so I did, and all the 14-year-olds found it hilarious, so I started wearing dresses to concerts and parties and things like this, and then many years later in life, I became a pro wrestler, and I said I'm going to wear a dress into the ring and call myself Ladybeard. I was instantly the most popular wrestler in Hong Kong, which is where I used to live, and then when I started my music career, I said I'm also going to wear my dress to start my music career, and then I moved to Japan, and I got put in a group with a pair of young Japanese pop stars, and that blew up over the internet with a song called Nippon Manju, and I've been doing this full time for the past 10 years.
That is the quickest career recap I've seen, and what? Where do we even start? Where do we even start with that?
Hey, elevator pitch, my friend. We've got from ground to 4. I need to squeeze it in as compact a package as possible.
That's crazy. Now, it doesn't sound like this was planned, this entire journey. You started off just doing it for fun, and then, you decided to move overseas at some stage. At what stage do you think that you said, right, this is what I want to pursue? Or was it like a journey of discovery of, let's try this? Where did that kind of go?
It was a massive journey of discovery, actually, and a lot of the parts were just a case of opportunities popped up, and I pursued them as I got them, and they led, like, one thing kind of led to another as such. So it's interesting that you should ask that, actually, because I actually started out as an actor and a voice actor and a stuntman. So I went through acting school in Adelaide, then I moved from Adelaide to Melbourne where I had my agent, and I'm going through the standard young actor story. When you audition for things, you don't get any jobs, and you expect to just keep trying and somehow stay alive in Melbourne. But whilst I was there, I was also training with this Aussie who had spent 9 years on the Jackie Chan stunt team.
Ooh.
And then moved back to Australia, and then moved back to Australia to start his own team and try and start doing stunt stuff in Australia. I was on his team, and so one night I was sitting there after training, talking to him about these auditions, complaining about the whole thing. Because here's what happened. I did. If you will recall, being the Aussie that you are, you recall the TV show McLeod's Daughters. Yeah?
Of course. Were you on McLeod's Daughters?
I was not, but it seems every other human being in Adelaide
was.
So I'm the only person from Adelaide who was never on McLeod's Daughters. But what happened was I auditioned for a McLeod's Daughters role at one point.
Yeah.
And did my audition. I thought it went great. And then afterwards, I got a call from the casting agent. And by the way, I'm so grateful to this woman because no one has done this for me ever before or since. And she gave me feedback on my audition.
Right.
And she said, so we can see that you're good. We can see that you're well-trained and, you're in good shape and all these excellent things. And she said, you lack experience. So from our perspective, once you go and get some experience, then you'll be employable, right? And so she said, now I understand that's a double-edged sword because how do you get experience if people like us don't give you experience?
Yeah.
But that's our feedback for you. Take it, do with it as you will. And I'm so grateful for that feedback because I'm like, all right, cool. Like I say, no one else ever did that for me.
Yeah.
And also I knew what I had to get done so I could be employed in Australia, right? So I'm like, all right. So I'm complaining to my stunt trainer about this one night. And he goes, well, you should move to Hong Kong. Because if you go to Hong Kong, you're going to be a minority. So your pool of competition is much, much smaller.
Right.
You've
Okay.
got the martial arts skills, and he was from the Jackie Chan stunt team, so he's like, I can introduce you to the people who can get you the opportunities. You can go to Hong Kong, you just hang out for a few months, do a few bits and pieces of movies and TV and whatnot, then come back to Australia, more employable.
Right.
With this whole, you need some experience to get more experience kind of thing.
So the original goal was go to Hong Kong, get some experience, come back, maybe go to McLeod's Daughters, and from there it kind of goes up. Right, okay.
And be an actor in Australia. That was the original career plan. That's exactly right.
So what happened when you got to Hong Kong then, if that's the case?
Well, I got to Hong Kong and there was an abundance of work. I got there and there was just so much more opportunity there than there was in Australia. So
Right.
he was right. Like as a foreigner in Hong Kong, especially if you're, within your age range and your height and your look and those things, it'll be you and the same 2 or 3 other guys auditioning for every job, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So, interestingly, at the same time, my friend Kevin, who's Chinese, who's Australian-born Chinese, he had the same situation in Australia. So when an Asian role came up on Australian TV, it was either going to be him or one of 3 other guys.
Right.
And they all knew each other. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, yeah.
So, yeah. So now it was the reverse for me once I went to Hong Kong.
Interesting.
And then out of the ones of us who could do stunts and do kung fu, it's even fewer, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
so
right.
there was just so much more work available for me there. So I organized a really fun, interesting life for myself in Hong Kong, being an actor and a voice actor and a stuntman, and life was wonderful. And then the 2008 financial crisis came along and just wiped it all out overnight.
Wow. So,
yeah.
if you don't mind me asking, before we go too far ahead, if you're allowed to say, what kind of jobs or roles did you get while you're in Hong Kong? Anything that's like really memorable or anything that people would have heard of, or?
Yeah, you can watch a movie that has me in it. It's called The Fortune Buddies. So you can go and watch that. I'm big and fat in this film, so prepare yourself for that. I think the whole thing's on YouTube, so you can find it. And I'm pretty sure I pop up exactly 30 minutes into the film. So if you got 30 minutes fast forward, you'll see Ladybeard straight away.
That's
He's
cool.
a big fat man in Hong Kong.
Wow.
Yeah, so there's that. I did some other ones. There's a Donnie Yen film called Flashpoint that I'm in very briefly. That was my first feature film that I got an actual on-camera role in. And then, if you know anything about Hong Kong, the big TV station there is called TVB. So I did several episodes of TVB shows. Radio Television Hong Kong, several episodes of their shows. What's your heritage? Do you have Cantonese heritage?
Yes, actually. I think my parents are from, not Hong Kong specifically, but from somewhere around that area, some smaller village kind of area. Yeah, yeah.
So do you know the Hong Kong infrastructure, like with TVB and ATV and the other networks and whatnot?
Interestingly enough, I've never been there myself. Parents have been like, "Oh, look, we're gonna go." This is obviously once I've moved out of home and graduated, kind of thing. And they're like, "Oh, we're gonna go. Do you want to come?" And by this stage, I've got a job to hold down. I've got other things to do. So I'm like, I'd like to, but not on the cards. But please explain to me, Hong Kong and its entity. What's it about?
Well, Hong Kong, in terms of keeping in mind, I was in show business and I was there to do films and TV and whatnot. That's kind of the world that I know regarding Hong Kong. So at the time, this was before the internet was what it currently is. So there were 2 TV stations. There was TVB and there was ATV. And so they had their shows and you were either doing one of them. And there was Radio Television Hong Kong, which is kind of like SBS, I suppose.
Yep.
And so these were your employers, and then every now and again, feature films would kind of come and go. And there were the local Hong Kong feature films, and then there were international films that were shooting in Hong Kong. Generally speaking, for Caucasians, the international films would give you opportunities to do things like stand-in work, extra work, maybe stunt double for a Hong Kong actor if you had the skills to do that. For a Hollywood actor if you had the skills to do that, because all the actual acting roles for those were cast in Hollywood.
Right.
And then those Hollywood actors would get brought to Hong Kong. Then there were the local movies when, there were not many roles for foreigners, but when they did need foreigners, like I said, there was only this small pocket of you, like small pool of you to choose from.
Yeah.
So then those were kind of the kung fu movies and things like that, when you play evil white man flirting with Chinese girls.
Of course.
Things
Yep.
like that. Yeah, I did a lot of that. It's good fun. Evil colonialist, all this kind of stuff.
You would have been perfect for them as well, because you're, super tall, you're super broad. You could probably pull off an evil smile if you wanted to, and play the part exactly. So that would have been great fun.
You can watch the Fortune Buddies. You'll have a lot of fun watching my ridiculous career. When the Fortune Buddies shot, that was this was a bit later. It was towards the end of my time in Hong Kong, but that's a movie about pro wrestling.
Yeah,
and
okay.
I was the only non-Chinese pro wrestler in Hong Kong at the time. So you can see how this works. When
Yeah,
you're
yeah.
literally the only option, you get the job pretty easily, right?
Okay. So,
Yeah.
you mentioned there around the global financial crisis in '08, things came crashing down. What happened then? Because this was a good, 15, 16 years ago now. So,
Yeah.
what happened there?
No. So at the time I was doing movies and whatnot, but movies and TV were all sporadic. They were, gigs. They turn up every now and again. I spent most of my time actually dubbing anime into English. So, yeah. So, the cable TV channel Animax, yeah?
Yes.
Okay, cool. So when you watch Animax in Asia, in any of the Asian territories, all the properties, you can watch them in either original Japanese or local dub. So like in Hong Kong, that's the Cantonese dub, and then in Jakarta, that'd be the Indonesian dub, etc.
Yep.
Or the Asian English dub. So what they would do was, so there were these dubbing companies. There were a couple in Hong Kong. There were some in the Philippines. And what would happen was these studios would be cheap, and they didn't want to pay the Americans for their dub because they had to pay royalties and it was really expensive, right? So what they would do is they would just get the license to be able to redub it, and they redub it with these teams in Asia. We do it for a flat fee, and then it was theirs in perpetuity, and they could play it as many times as they want without having to pay extra royalties and all this kind of stuff.
So you did a lot of anime dubs, did you?
Yeah, I did a lot of anime dubs. A lot of them.
That's knowledge to me. That's completely new. Are there any roles that you would have played in the local English dub overseas in Asia? That's any big roles that you know of?
Yeah, so I was Grell in Black Butler, if you watched that show.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. I was Tomozo, the grandpa in Chibi Maruko-chan, if you know that show.
Yeah, right. Oh my god.
There was lots of them. There was Nezumi Otoko in Gegege no Gitaro.
Yeah.
Spooky Gitaro was the English name. Lots of them, man. We did several of the Gundam series. We did Gundam Sangokuden. I can't remember his name, the red one. There's the white one in the middle, then the red one and the green one. I was the red one.
Yeah, right, okay.
Gundam Age. I was Wolf and Nickel in Gundam Age. This is an interesting story as well, because this ties back to my martial arts past.
Yeah.
There's a very famous Indonesian martial arts movie called The Raid. Do you know this movie?
Oh, I haven't heard of that one, no.
Okay, it's wonderful, great martial arts. If you like action films, watch The Raid, because it's fantastic.
Adding this to my list of things to note.
If you get the Blu-ray of The Raid, this is actually one of the only ones we did for the American release. If you get the American Blu-ray for The Raid, and you set it to English for the dub, then I am the voice of the lead in The Raid.
That is crazy! So it's a martial arts film, so, I don't know, for dubbing martial arts films or anything with action scenes, that it's very different doing, I don't know, a romance dub or something, where you're in the booth and you're sounding all passionate and, yearning for something, but when you're obviously fighting someone, what does that look like in the booth when you're dubbing something like that?
Well, it's a case of, because for action like that, it's all very fast-paced,
Yeah.
So what will happen is you'll go the first time and you'll just try and pick up on the obvious things that happen. So if there's a big punch or a big kick, some kind of obvious thing that happens, you'll dub that. Then you'll go back, and now you've seen the scene once, and you'll try and get all the smaller bits that you've missed. So for action stuff, you're either hitting someone, so it's either your noise as you hit them, you're either getting hit, or something else is happening, like you're falling off a building, or you're getting cut, or something like that.
Yeah,
right?
wow.
Yeah.
That's so cool. I don't think so far, I haven't talked to anyone who's done anything in terms of voice acting roles in the industry so far. This is crazy. It's learning something cool out of you.
Glad I could be your first. Excellent. Happy days.
Fantastic. Anyway,
keep it on dubbing for a second.
Yeah,
it's quite
sure.
Interesting. I imagine your audience is probably interested. So it's so funny though, because now I do all these anime conventions and I get to go and meet the American voice actors.
Yeah, right.
Who do the actual American
dubs. The American dubs, right.
It's so interesting because they will tell me, we have this long process of figuring out who we're going to cast in each character, and then we'll get them in the booth, and it's only the main character doing his parts for several weeks, and then we'll bring in the female lead, and it's only her parts for several weeks, and then we'll bring in the smaller roles and all this, right?
Yeah.
And they spend so much time making everything so good. And when we were dubbing, we had to get through everyone for a full episode, 6 episodes a day. So the Americans will tell me, about 3 weeks, 4 weeks for one episode. And we're like, we did 6 episodes a day.
So is that like, I don't know, say the 6 or 7 voice actors, was that like 6 or 7 of you in the studio and you just play the episode and you just kind of go as best as you can at the time?
Yeah. So that's how I started when I dubbed. But it was interesting because about halfway through my time there, the technology improved.
Yeah.
So you couldn't do that anymore, and you had to separate the voices, and you had to do things individually because the
Right.
sound quality was. But when I first got there, yeah, you would have 8 people in the booth at once, and so there's one microphone, yeah.
Yeah.
All right, so here's your mic. So whoever is the lead in the show is sitting right in front of the mic, yeah. And then you have the secondary leads, like the supporting leads, sitting either side of them. And then you have everyone else, and then the next most important people, the next biggest roles, standing behind the lead here and here, and then the kind of the smaller roles standing either side of them or sitting on the edge of the table. And everyone, the lead is right in front of the mic, so they could just read their script and talk. But everyone else would have to, like if you're on the side, you have to lean into the mic to talk like that and then lean out again. Or if you're coming in from the top, you'd have to lean down over someone's shoulder, say your line, and then move back again. And you had to be really careful not to like rustle your fabric as you move.
Yeah.
On the table or anything, because that all gets picked up by the mic. So you'd have 8 people, and of course you're trying to read one script, so you're trying to quietly move pages of this script while you're all reading and performing at the same time, and people are leaning in and leaning out and whatnot. It was really very cool, actually. It was kind of like an assembly line when I first started doing it. It was really awesome. It was the most fun like that.
That sounds like, I don't think I've ever heard of it being done like that. It's always, let's put headphones on, get in a booth, maybe we'll have separate booths or something, or we'll at least have separate microphones. But it sounds like you're just like an a cappella group, just, crowding around the one microphone. And
yeah, actually, that's a very good comparison. I've never thought of that.
Yeah.
That's a very good comparison,
Interesting.
actually. Let me tell you this, though. Then when I first got to Japan, I did a bit of dubbing for a Japanese anime when I first got to Japan.
Yeah, wow.
The way they do it in Japan is like this. So we were in this tiny little booth, yeah? And it was in Hong Kong. It was hard because you'd get no oxygen in there, so everyone starts yawning and getting sleepy, right? In Japan, because you have to soundproof it so that it doesn't get picked up. In Japan, they dub in a gigantic room, and everyone's at the back of the room, sitting down on chairs. And then when it's time for your line, you get up and you quietly walk to the microphone, and then you say your lines, and then you quietly walk back again and sit down. But it's like, it's a 10-meter journey from your chair to the mic. So everyone's got their own script, and they need to be reading ahead so that they have gotten up and they are prepared for their line, every line. And then you're meant to get in, hit your line, and then get out again, so that the next person come in and hit their line and get out again.
It's so interesting just hearing how different countries do dubs in such different ways, because it doesn't sound like there's one universal standard of this is how it needs to be done. It's just do the best that we can do with the equipment we've got, in the room that we've got, with the voice actors that we've got.
Yeah. And everyone will have their a different set of conventions in terms of the way they approach the work and the professionalism and what they will prioritize. And things like this. So that was a really cool job, and I was very upset that this financial crisis ruined it. I could have done that job every day for the rest of my life.
So what happened? You went to Hong Kong, and it looks like you got lots of different roles. It was acting, it was stunt work, it was voice acting. And you got to go on movies and stuff, so it was all the experience that you wanted, that you needed. So in 2008, when the global financial crisis hit, you could have definitely come back to Australia, landed that part in McLeod's Daughters or Neighbours, whatever the peak of television was, but you didn't. What did you kind of do then?
Well, it was the global financial crisis,
right?
So it didn't just happen in Hong Kong; it happened in Australia.
Yeah.
So now, like I'm sitting in Hong Kong, recently unemployed, trying to figure out what to do. I'm on the phone with my friends in Australia going, what's it like at home? It's like, it was worse than when I left.
Yeah,
when I left, there'd been not much work. Everyone competing over only a handful of roles. Now, there was like no roles at all after the financial crisis.
Right.
Yeah, they went down to something like, Neighbours and Home and Away and almost nothing else on TV.
Yeah.
Yeah. It was a horrible period for everyone. So all the Australians then who had been working in Australia, my understanding is the ones I knew about, started leaving Australia. So I'm like, well, so even the guys who were already working are now not working in Australia. So I probably can't go back and try and get roles. So yeah, it was a real problem because I was sitting there going, well, now what do I do? Hong Kong, where I found all this opportunity, it's all gone here now. Now there's even less at home than there was when I left. So that's probably not viable. If I do something like move to Los Angeles or New York or London or something like that. I'm just another young white man, the same as all the other young white men. I have this, experience in Asia behind me, but it's probably not going to count for that much. So, what am I going to do? And this was the point at which one night I was at a heavy metal show.
Right.
And I saw a kid wearing a t-shirt that said Hong Kong Pro Wrestling.
Right.
I got to him, see him in the mosh pit wearing this Hong Kong Pro Wrestling shirt. Keep in mind, Hong Kong, because real estate in Hong Kong is really valuable. It means that venues are small, so shows are small.
Yeah.
So there's only maybe, a couple of hundred people in there. So this band finishes. I've been looking at the back of his shirt with Hong Kong Wrestling written on it. I go up to him and I'm like, hey, what's this Hong Kong Pro Wrestling on the back of your shirt? He's like, yeah. We have this pro wrestling league in Hong Kong. Yeah, I'm a wrestler. Yo, you want to come to training?
That was it.
All right. So I'm like, all right, sure. So so what happened was I got his phone number. I'm like, all right, okay, cool. Great to meet you. His name was Madness, by the way. My
Wow.
Madness.
What's your name? Madness? Wow.
Hey man, my name's Madness. It was so hilarious. So I meet Madness, get Madness's number, and then I kind of, finish the show, leave and whatnot, and I say, all right, I'll call you. And then a few weeks later, what happened was I think it was another metal show, and I was looking for someone to go with. And for whatever reason, my friends couldn't go that night. And I'm like, oh, I remember this kid Madness. So I called him about going to this show. He answered the phone. He's like, hey, man, hey, what's happening? Yeah, you want to come to wrestling training? I'm like, well, that's not why I was calling, but sure. Like a week later or something, I went to my first training at Hong Kong Wrestling Federation.
Yeah.
Which was... You don't know the geography of Hong Kong, I guess you can look it up. But in Hong Kong, there's like Hong Kong Island, which is here.
Yep.
And that's where most of the foreigners are hanging out down there. That's where the central business district is.
Okay.
Then there's the water, and then there's Kowloon Peninsula here. And then most of the action that's left happens in these two bits, Kowloon and Hong Kong.
Okay.
And then out here, there's all the new territories, which is basically just suburbia.
Right.
Suburbia and former industrial areas, right?
Gotcha.
So he tells me, all right, well, we're going out to Fortan, which is like out in the industrial area.
Right.
I'm like, oh boy, yeah. So
Here we go.
Get out to Fortan. I meet him at the station. Hey man, that's my new friend. Madness. Like, all right, let's go to training. I got my backpack with my, some gym shorts and what have you. We walk up this long hill. It's a long, long hill, and above me there's a mountain with a forest on it. And I'm like, I don't know how this story's gonna end up, but. We right before the building stopped. We got to some industrial building.
Right.
We go into this industrial building with no passenger elevator. It only had one of those freight elevators.
Right.
You need to manually click it open.
I haven't seen one of those for years. Right.
Actually, so we get into this rickety elevator. And I'm like, this story could end horrendously badly. Go up to whatever floor. We get out, and in the corridor are all those, at a Chinese funeral, they burn those toys of money and cars and things like that to send to your deceased ancestors. The factory next door makes these. So out in the corridor, it's just nothing but toys for the dead. And you're like, oh dear. All right. We walk past all these toys for the dead. He unlocks this door, opens it up, and there's this awful, tiny, little, dusty industrial room with a homemade pro wrestling ring in the middle of it. And I'm like, okay. And he's like, all right, this is where we train. Welcome. I'm like, okay. You step on the floor and it's just concrete with dust coming out.
Oh,
of the
God.
There's no lining or anything. The place is filthy, right? And I'm like, okay. The trainer shows up at one point and is like, hey. I'm like, hey. He's like, welcome. Thanks. So I start training in this tiny little gym out in the middle of nowhere, and then a month later have my debut public match.
So this was your first taste of doing wrestling, was going to this suburban industrial district, middle of nowhere, up a rickety freight elevator next to a factory that made the burnable things for funerals, in a tiny gym, because I'm assuming the rent there was cheap so they could afford to put it out there.
It's more the ceilings were high enough for them to be able to stand on the turnbuckle.
Oh, I see. Right. Yeah. And then a week later you had your debut. And is this where you came up with the name Ladybeard at the time, or?
Yeah, so here's what happened. So I start training, and because I was a stuntman, I picked up on the basics of wrestling relatively quickly.
Yeah.
And so a month later, they were having this public show, and it was going to be the first one. It was held in this gym, so we could get an audience into this gym. I don't know how they were going to plan to pack them in there, but they did. So, all right. So they're like, all right, cool. So you want to be on the show? I'm like, all right. So we're discussing gimmicks and whatnot, and every other wrestler in Hong Kong, their gimmick was, I am a wrestler. And that's just where it starts and where it ends.
Right.
All right. Yeah. And I'm like, because I've grown up with, watching WWF, and so I loved all these big theatrical wrestlers.
Yeah, of course.
Big characters and the gimmicks. And I said, and I've been, this is the thing, I've been still doing my cross-dressing when I was in my private life, right?
Yeah.
So I've been going to metal concerts and whatnot, wearing my sister's school dress and all this kind of thing. And when I started doing that in Hong Kong, because Hong Kong's such a conservative society, they were like, "Ooh, the funniest person I've ever seen in my life," right? So they had been loving me in a dress just when I'd been socializing on the weekends and whatnot. I started going to nightclubs and dresses and whatnot. Everyone's like, "Oh, hilarious." So it came time for my first match. We're talking about gimmicks. And I said, what if I wear a dress into the ring and my name is Ladybeard? And they're like, okay.
Right.
So we go with that. We organize with me and the trainer, whose name is Ho Ho Lun, and he went on to wrestle in the WWE.
Wow.
So you can look him up. Yep.
Yeah.
So he and I had our first match. I went into the ring as Ladybeard, and I remember, so this was so ridiculous. This gym was so small, and on some Saturday night, they packed 50 people or something in, just squeezed in around the ring to watch. All these, 16-year-old kids these skinny Chinese boys who called themselves pro wrestlers were all there, all doing their matches and that. And so the locker room was, it was one little alcove. It was the window alcove, and there was like a wire stuck to one wall, and the wire was attached to a curtain, and the curtain was then attached to a broomstick, and someone had to hold the broomstick up at the other side for the entire show.
Oh, no.
What happened is, you'd have the kids hold the broomstick. That'd just be the kids, like the wrestlers, right?
Yeah,
They
yeah.
finish their match, they come hold the broomstick. And they'd be watching their matches, and just slowly the broomstick would start to fall down. So just bit by bit, the locker room would get exposed. You had to grab it and hold it back up again, tell them to hold it, and then hold it, and then slowly
goes
come
back
down.
again. Oh, my goodness.
So I'm in this locker room 5 minutes before my match or something. I'm standing there, and I'm wearing this black and pink Lolita dress that I had found in the Mongkok markets.
Hell yeah.
My hair was short at the time. I had all these tiny little pigtails all over my head. I'm standing there, I'm going, what the hell am I doing? Wait a second. I've been doing this pro wrestling thing for a month. I have no idea what I'm doing. I'm wearing a freaking dress with my hair and a bunch of pigtails. I'm about to go out and do this in public? Oh, God, what was I thinking? Oh, man. It's 5 minutes before I go on. 5 minutes before I go on, I start going to myself, how do I get out of this? How do I get out of this? How do I get out of this? There was no way to get to the exit without going past the audience.
Yeah.
There was no way to get to my clothes. They were out in another room so far. So the only way to get out of this was either to do my match or just walk past everyone anyway and be like, why is this giant white man in a skirt walking in front of the audience? You know what I'm saying? There would be no way to get out of it, right? So 5 minutes before that, I freak out. I'm like, what am I going to do? This is going to ruin my career. I'll never be able to get a job as an actor ever again. I'll always be remembered as the moron who put on a dress for that wrestling thing. Oh! And I start freaking out and panicking. And then I kind of go, well, there's no way out. So I have to do it now. So, I did. I just went, all right, no worries. Let's do this thing. Here we go. I am Ladybeard.
And then the 50 people in the room, what did they react like when you kind of stepped out into the ring?
Well, I went out where they hit my music. I went out through my curtain, through my broomstick-oriented curtain. Went out full confidence. I'm like, here we go. I am Ladybeard. We are here to do this match. Go out. I'm Ladybeard. Go in, do my match, and they all loved it. They all loved it. They thought I was the greatest thing since sliced bread. It was funny. I went in with the plan of being a big heel, which in wrestling terminology means bad guy, right?
Yeah.
I'm like, I'm this big, noisy, hairy, white dude wearing a skirt. I look like a moron. Everyone will hate me. Nah, they all loved it. They were like, brilliant, Ladybeard. We love you. So it was It was like an organic face turn when I intended to start my career and be a heel. It was from day one I was a face and I've never wrestled heel. Purely because I did this Ladybeard thing, and it turned out I thought they were gonna think I was just a moron and a clown, and they absolutely loved it. So
that's awesome. Yeah. That's amazing. So
that was the deception.
So that would have been, global financial crisis. You're not really doing acting stuff. So like, all right, I got to do something. So you're giving this a try. What happened from there? Did you just kind of continue to wrestle for a long time, or what was the next kind of thing?
Yeah, so then that went so well, and I came backstage after that, back to the locker room with the broomstick. I come backstage and I'm like, that went great. That was awesome. Oh my goodness. So, all right, cool. So now I guess I'm a pro wrestler, and I guess I'm on shows every month because they were running shows every month.
Yeah.
Okay. So I guess I'm a wrestler now, and I guess I'm Ladybeard. It was very interesting because then we had, this is right at the beginning of YouTube. So we filmed it and we put the videos on YouTube. And, our numbers were not good, but by Hong Kong underground standards, they were, fine.
Yeah.
My match got a lot more views than anyone else's matches. And everyone who watched it loved Ladybeard. Speaking my terrible Cantonese, they all thought it was hilarious, right?
Yeah.
And so a week later, I go to a metal show, and I arrive, and everyone goes, Ladybeard! And I'm like, hi! Didn't expect this, right?
Yeah.
So this happened. I was like, all right, well, I guess I'm a wrestler now. I guess in this very tiny community, people are starting to know who I am. So I guess we'll go with this.
Yeah.
So I started wrestling, started doing the shows every month, and they're all kind of, they're going and they're going and they're going. I'm a very bad wrestler at the time. I still don't know what I'm doing. But, that's how a lot of wrestlers start.
Of course, yeah.
So we're doing these matches, and what happened was this is a long story.
There's a lot to your life. Look, we're gonna. I think this is very important because it's kind of like sets the foundation for how you got from a regular Aussie bloke in Adelaide to where you are now. So trust me, I'm enjoying this. We'll keep going with it. Honestly, keep going.
Okay, I'm glad you're enjoying it. I feel like I'm doing all the talking. I feel like I should say, so how you doing?
No, please. This is about you. So we're here to learn about you. And we're in the middle of the wrestling part of your career. People are starting to recognize you. So I don't know, you pick it up and run with it? You kind of keep going, or?
Well, here's what happened. So I loved heavy metal since I was a teenager, right?
Yeah.
Wanted to be a heavy metal screamer when I was in high school, but I couldn't scream, didn't know how to do it without hurting myself. I could never figure it out. All right, so I decided, okay, well, I can't do that, so I'll be an actor. All right, so I got to acting school and everything and go this journey to this point. Here's what's interesting. Because like I say, I'd been dubbing as well, yeah? So very interestingly, dubbing monsters and whatnot taught me how to scream.
Wow.
And let me nerd out for 1 second because it's very interesting.
Go.
In acting school, the acting technique that we learn to make things really realistic is you have what's called a thought process, which is you go through a process of creating and constructing false memories, and then when you're in your scene, you basically, in your brain, you play the memory. So it's like kind of like a movie running in front of your eyes, right?
Gotcha.
You play the memory. Yeah. And so in this way, you have your memory, your fake memory you've created of the time you got broken up with, or the time your dad threw a sock at you, or whatever it may be, right?
Yeah.
And that gives you the impulse for whatever you've got to do in the scene, yeah? So it's very interesting. When you're dubbing, you have the anime screen in front of you, right? So it's almost like someone else has made a thought process for you, because you can see the characters interacting.
Yeah.
They're expressive in anime. They're very expressive with their faces and so forth. And you hear the Japanese voice, which is very expressive. So dubbing things like monsters and whatnot, like I remember there was this one fight scene I had to play this Yeti kind of thing, and it's being killed by the hero of this story.
Yeah.
And somehow this taught me how to scream, because I kind of got out of my logical head and I stopped asking myself, how do I make this sound without injuring my throat? And I had the image in front of me, and I just voiced this character with the impulse that the image was giving me. And so I was able to bypass all that, thinking about things technically. And I just unconsciously made this noise, and it was a death metal scream.
That's crazy. So you learned how to do a scream accidentally through doing a voice acting role.
Yeah.
That's crazy. Is that something? Because same thing. I've got friends who love singing. I got friends who love doing the death metal stuff, and same thing. I ask them, how do you do that without injuring yourself? And they kind of struggle. It's like, oh, you kind of do this and this, but the way in which someone describes it to you, it's very different in practice than the way you describe it. So is that similar for you as well? People try to teach you, or you learnt from YouTube, but you just couldn't get it?
After all of this, I went to a vocal coach and I learned how to do it the technically correct way.
Right.
But at the start, it was me just doing it like this. So trying to bypass my unconscious thought about what I was doing with my throat and just making the noises. So yeah, it is very interesting. Once you learn the technique correctly, you could do it all day and you'll get tired, but you won't get injured, right?
Yeah.
But for me, it was a case of when I was a teenager, I was sitting in my room going, no, that didn't work. No, that didn't work. Trying to figure out what to do here so that I wouldn't. But once I forgot about all of that and I just did the performance in congruence with this character that I saw on the screen, I bypassed all that technical thought and I could just unconsciously do it. And I was thinking about it, right? And I was like, if you've got a saber-toothed tiger chasing you, and you're screaming, you're not thinking about the technicalities of your throat. You're just getting the hell away from the freaking tiger. So I was always like, there must be a way to do it. I just didn't technically know how to do it. But it was that exact thing, was getting past my conscious brain that allowed me to learn how to do it.
That's like unlocking a Super Saiyan part of you that you never knew existed, and it's all of a sudden you find it. So that's really cool.
You see the irony of how when I was a teenager I said I want to be a heavy metal singer, but I can't, so I'll be an actor, and then being an actor taught me how to be a heavy metal singer.
That's great. Like it's just come full circle at this point. It's great.
Yeah, right.
So at this point, in your story, you're wrestling. You've learned how to do a scream.
Learn how to scream.
Did you, by the sounds of it, you got a gig somewhere which allowed you to do that?
Right.
Or?
Here's what happened, right? So when I first got to Hong Kong, I started learning Cantonese. I started listening to Cantonese pop songs, to work on my Cantonese, right? And so I've always loved metal covers of pop songs. I'm not sure if you've listened to any of these, but there are, various covers of things like Katy Perry and Justin Bieber and whatnot. Yeah. And when you hear them screamed as a metal song and played on distorted guitars, there's something I find very joyous about that. Because it takes the sound of this pop song that you're used to hearing a certain way in everyday life, and then they scream it and it kind of subverts the experience.
Right.
And for me, that's very joyous. It's a very joyous experience. Okay. So when I started listening to Cantonese pop songs, I said to myself, these are all really catchy songs. I wonder who's done the metal covers.
Yeah.
And it turns out nobody had.
Right.
And so this is back when I first got to Hong Kong, and I'm like, well, somebody should do that. And then, fast forward to this point when I'm doing the wrestling and whatnot, I'm sitting there and I'm like, I can now scream. I always wanted to be a metal singer. I'm here in Hong Kong where there are these fantastic, catchy pop songs. No one's done metal covers of them. I'm starting to know them all because I'm listening to them all, trying to learn Cantonese. I'm going to start a metal project singing metal covers of Cantonese pop songs.
Wow.
And I said, and I'm wrestling at the moment as this Ladybeard gimmick. I've built a small community of fans around this Ladybeard thing. I'm going to do it as my Ladybeard character, and as such, bring the fans from the wrestling over to my music career.
Wow. Right. Okay. So that was the goal. And so what, you started doing like YouTube covers, or what was the kind of...
No, it was quite a process. Like I say, this was before the internet is what it is now, right?
Oh, right. This is back in 08, 09 era, right? So
08, 09,
okay.
Yeah. So one of the guys I dubbed with was a musician who could actually play guitar and, write drum lines and this kind of thing. So I spoke to him about, like, can I hire you to make tracks for me? I originally tried to organize a band.
Yeah.
And the problem with organizing a band, as I'm sure most people who've been in bands will know, is the artists are flakes.
Oh, yeah.
And they never show up.
Oh, yeah.
People don't show up and people quit willy-nilly. So I tried to do that for a while, and then I realized that was not going to be practical. I said, if I'm going to do this, it has to be a one-man operation.
Yeah.
So I said, all right, I'll go on stage and I'll sing live with a backing track.
Yep.
And then I'll develop the career, and as the career develops, if I do well enough, people will give me a band.
Yeah.
That's kind of my theory.
Yeah, cool.
Yeah. So this dude he's also from Australia, actually. This dude, Scott, from Lismore, who dubbed with me. I said to him, can I hire you to make tracks for me, metal covers of these Cantonese pop songs? I'll send you the songs, and I'll tell you what I want them to sound like with my cover, and you can actually make them for me, and I'll pay you to do that. And he's like, yeah, cool. So we did that, and I So that's how I got my tracks, and I had to learn all my lyrics in Cantonese.
Yep.
And keeping in mind, so this is very interesting as well. Wow, there's a lot that has happened, and this story is dense. So when you learn another language, do you speak Cantonese?
I don't. I learned very small bits from my mum's, like, oh, suck fun, come to dinner, or poor chair, thank you, or just, very bits and pieces here and there, but nothing otherwise.
It's been my experience, once you start performing in a different language, the new language subverts everything you know.
Right.
So all your technique and experience you've got over the years, once you start putting another language in there, everything just falls apart, and you're like a 3-year-old in their kindergarten nativity play. You're just frozen on stage because you're struggling with this.
Of course.
Your brain's operating on a whole new level with
Yeah,
this
yeah.
new language, right? So, so I'm there and I have to remember these Cantonese lyrics, and my Cantonese still isn't very good. So I'm like, all right, how am I going to do this? So what I ended up doing was I got the lyrics, and I got Hong Kong friends to write out in kind of Romanized pinyin for me.
Yeah.
Pingham. They're to write out it in Roman numerals, and I just sat there and learnt it all phonetically. So just learned every line of every song phonetically.
Yeah.
And just drilled it and drilled it and drilled it and drilled it until I could remember it. And did that for a handful of songs. And then started finding out who was booking the shows. I got in contact and I said, I got this heavy metal thing I want to do, this Ladybeard thing. I got a little fan base for my wrestling. Can you give me a spot on your show? And someone said yes. And so I started doing shows in Hong Kong.
And a lot of the audience was your wrestling fan base. And
yeah, it was, that was kind of what I imagined. I imagined that the wrestling fan base would come over. My music debut was in the ring, because what happened was we ran this storyline with another wrestler called Wyatt, in which we do a match and he and I are tag partners. Then he betrays me, and then a bunch of guys all assault me, and it gives me a neck injury, so I have to rest for several months. Right?
Oh,
I
wow.
can't wrestle.
Yeah, right.
In that time, I was creating this heavy metal show. And then in my comeback match, I came back and I said, you've had the great realization that I need to sing heavy metal. I'd have to go and remember exactly what I said. It was something along those lines,
Yeah.
right? And then my music debut was before my revenge match against him. So did my debut of this pop song in the ring. That went really well. Everyone loved it. Cool. Then we had our match. That went really well. Everyone loved it. Cool. And then I started doing the shows outside the ring. So I started booking the metal shows.
Yeah, wow. So that was kind of your career, your source of income, your passion project, all kind of coming together. At the one time.
At this point, it was definitely not. Well, Ladybeard was not a source of income. I had to just keep doing whatever bits and pieces of voice acting and acting were around the place.
Yeah.
And then I had to fund all the Ladybeard stuff myself. So it was a case of just, it's post-financial crisis. Everyone's broke. All right, just spend less. So I moved out of my, nice apartment that I had been living in. I moved into this tiny little flea bag apartment. It was awful. But actually, it wasn't awful. It was actually pretty great, to be honest.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was actually pretty cool. But I moved in there. The rent was so cheap. It was fantastic. So I just saved money as much as I possibly could. Just ate, 2-minute noodles and this kind of thing. And just saved as much money as I could. And I put it all into making this Ladybeard thing happen. Paying for the tracks and paying for costumes. Yeah, all this. It was a long time before it made me any money at all. But it is, in terms of what you say, it was my profession, as in the performing, coming together with my passion and coming together with this newfound interesting fan base and this strange cross-dressing hobby I'd had for 10, 15 years or something.
Wow.
All together. Yeah,
that's incredible. So by this stage, we've gone from, okay, not enough work in Australia, let's go to Hong Kong. In Hong Kong, doing the odd jobs, getting experience in stuntman, acting, everything that you kind of wanted to do. Global financial crisis hits. You're like, well, there's no acting jobs at the moment. What am I going to do? And you find yourself, teetering on. It's like, all right, let's try some wrestling. After that, you're like, oh, I'm learning how to sing from this. Let's try to do some music. And by this stage here, economies around the world slowly getting back on their feet. So you would have probably done this for, by the sounds of it, a few years running. which at one stage, I know somewhere in the story there's a move to Japan. So
Yeah.
where does that happen?
So what happened was, like I say, I started doing this in Hong Kong, started doing shows in Hong Kong and whatnot. But Hong Kong, it's a very small city. And I'd spoken to the other musicians, and they're like, the only way to get anything done is to tour. You have to get outside Hong Kong. There's just not a career to be had if you just stay in Hong Kong, right?
Yeah,
unless you are like a canto pop artist who's gone through the whole canto pop system, which I was not.
Yeah.
So I'm like, all right. So I have to tour. So I'm like, all right, let's start organizing some tours. So I started touring the neighborhood, toured Taiwan first, and okay, that went as well as it practically could. Keeping in mind, I had to go through the same process again with Mandarin songs this time.
Oh, wow.
So I had to learn Mandarin songs.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, mate. Every one of these bits of the story has so many stories in itself.
Yeah.
So, do this Taiwan tour, and okay, so when I started Ladybeard, I was sitting there and I was thinking to myself, kind of like what I explained before my first match. I'm going, all right, if I try this and it doesn't work, I will always be that idiot who put on the dress and thought it was going to work and it didn't work. Like, it's always going to be my, as the Japanese would say, kurorekshi, my black history.
Right.
It will come back to haunt me at critical moments,
Okay.
right? So I was like, but one of the things that kind of got me to do it, I was like, well, I know if this doesn't work in Hong Kong, I can't get this to work the way I imagine it right here, right now. I know I could always move to Japan because they're freaking crazy over there. So that's my original thinking, right? Yeah. So I've started touring and whatnot. Do Taiwan, that goes great. I'm back in Hong Kong, doing my shows in Hong Kong, and I'm like, all right, I got to figure out a way to tour to Japan. And so again, we go through the same process again with Japanese songs, figuring out what songs I can sing. Keep in mind, when I did this in Hong Kong, I had Hong Kong friends, and I could ask them, what are the pop songs? What will be funny when I sing a metal cover?
Yeah,
of it,
gotcha.
blah, blah, blah. Taiwan, it was harder. The Hong Kong guys still knew, but there's, obviously it's a different place. So, and it was Mandarin, so they don't know the culture in terms of on-the-ground culture as much.
Of course.
Throw in Japan, it's totally separate. And again, it's before TikTok, it's before YouTube is what it currently is. It's before
Instagram
AI,
even at this point too.
Yeah. So I'm like, all right, I need to find a way to tour Japan. How the hell am I going to do this? So I go through the same process again, figure out, just asking the few Japanese people I knew, hey, so would it be funny if a bearded white man wearing a skirt and pigtails sang this pop song, but like a metal song? They're like, what the hell are you talking about? But I go through this process again, make a Japanese show. Through a long story that I won't go into, just from the few Japanese contacts I had, I managed to book a tour of Japan.
Hell yeah.
And so in 2011, I go off for my Japan tour. And it went great. It went great. Yeah. What I originally thought of, well, if this concept doesn't work in Hong Kong, where they're very conservative, I'm like, well, at least I know it'll work in Japan because they're bonkers over there.
Yeah.
And luckily that assessment turned out to be true.
Yeah.
Let's just look at the Japanese person in the room right now and see if they're offended by my statement.
No?
Are you
Everything's
offended
okay.
by my statement? Blank stares from Shiori. This is Shiori's response.
Just a death stare.
Just a blank stare. That's it. So I organized this tour. This tour goes great. I did 3 shows in Tokyo, 1 in Osaka, 2 in Okinawa. Interestingly, Japan, whilst on one level the nation is extremely homogenistic, as in it's mainly Japanese people throughout the whole country,
Yep.
it is actually quite a diverse country in terms of regional tastes and regional cultures and whatnot.
Right.
And then there's also the American military presence here, which is, especially on Okinawa, is a big part of their culture down there. So it's very interesting. As I come and I do my tour, like I say, 3 shows in Tokyo, 1 in Osaka, 2 in Okinawa, yeah?
Yeah.
So that's my 6 shows. That's my first Japan tour. The first one in Tokyo was at a foreigner bar. So I'm like, all right, well, I sort of know what this is because we have those in Hong Kong.
Yeah.
All right. The second 2 were in like local Japanese venues. And so that was for 100% Japanese audience. And that went the way I expected it to, or the way I hoped it would, I suppose,
Yeah.
for small local audiences. Osaka, turns out they have a totally different culture unto themselves. And Osaka, particular, the comedy culture in Osaka is very specific.
Right.
And so they don't necessarily laugh at things that you think are funny, whereas everyone else in the rest of the country will, because they have such a tight
That's really
comedy
interesting.
culture.
Yeah,
There's
okay.
so many comedians there. So that show was a different experience in itself. And then we go down to Okinawa, when half the audience are Marines from the United States. So yeah, my last show in Okinawa was like a family fun day for the Japanese population and the Marines and their families. So I'm doing my heavy metal covers of pop songs, and there's like 4-year-old children walking in front of the stage and this kind of thing.
Oh my goodness.
So, but I do this tour and it goes great, and I'm like, cool. Well, all right, sweet. That went great, and particularly my third show in Tokyo really just went so well. It was remarkable. It was
Yeah.
the audience goes freaking crazy. They pop. They think the concept is fantastic. They think my covers are fantastic. They love the whole thing. A lot of people after the shows were like, "That was excellent. You need to move to Japan. You'll be a hit in Japan."
Yeah.
So I go back to Hong Kong, and I'm like, okay, cool. Well, my future's in Japan then. So I have to go through the process of getting organized to leave Hong Kong. I went back to Adelaide for a while to prepare, because I wanted to do some wrestling training with a club down there,
Yeah.
and also some streaming training, actually, because we have a very good metal school in Adelaide.
Cool.
So went there, prepared for a year. Then I moved to Japan. And then I got hooked up. That was a very hard move, by the way. Japan, at least at that time, was not an easy country to move to as a foreigner. They have their own systems regarding like the banking and their government systems. Everything's incongruent with everybody else's.
Yeah.
Comparatively, Hong Kong was relatively easy to move to, because they're a former British colony. So everything operated under the British system. And I also spent some time in the Philippines. And so moving to the Philippines, they're a former US colony. So all their systems are from the American systems, right? But Japan just has its own systems across the board for everything. So just all your foreign stuff just didn't work. The first 2 weeks in Japan, just every day I was trying to find an ATM that my card would work in.
No. Yeah, right.
It was so awful. Again, so I'd done my tour, yeah?
Yeah.
So Tokyo, Foreigner Bar, then 2 local shows in Tokyo. They went very, very well.
Yep.
And I got the reaction that I hoped for. Because what I always hope for when I do these metal covers of pop songs is you want people to feel the same joy that I was talking about earlier.
Yeah.
When they hear the pop song start, they're like, oh, I know this song. He's going to sing this song. This will be pleasant. And then you step over to, "Die!" And they're like, ah! And there's that, this is amazing, that joy that springs from that, right? So at those 2 shows in Tokyo, when I had local audiences, that's exactly what I got. And it's a beautiful thing, because you'll be on stage and you'll see individuals' faces and they'll go, oh! And it's just, that's the most rewarding thing ever, because it's such hard work to get everything organized just to get to the show. So when you get that reaction, you're like,
made it all worth it. That's fantastic.
Yeah, well, that's essentially the value that I was trying to create for people the whole time. So if you successfully do that, then you know that you got your job right, basically. You know what I mean?
That's fantastic to see. So you went from Australia to Japan. You said the moving process was a little bit kind of difficult. But
that's why we're at the start of Japan now.
Yes. So when you're in Japan, you obviously have to get your necessities sorted. And I think, what's the goal by this stage, to kind of focus more on the music aspect more than the wrestling stuff or your acting stuff? Like, was that kind of the focus of the time?
Yeah, because I was willing to do acting stuff, but I was more willing to do it just to kind of, get the ball rolling and get some things happening in Japan. I was, purely from the perspective of it seemed like there wasn't going to be much work anywhere anymore for a while. So this was one of the shifts I made. When I was an actor, when you're an actor, you're constantly going to other people and saying, "Can I have a job, please?" And so one of the shifts I wanted to make when I started this Ladybeard thing was to switch that to the thinking of an entrepreneur or a business owner, when you say, all right, I have created this product or service and now I'm going to sell it to the market or take it to a market. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, because that way it goes from external locus of control to internal locus of control.
Yeah.
Because, if you're saying, "Can I have a job, please?" No, you can't. Like, that's just the end of it, right?
Yeah.
But if you create your thing, you try to, you present it to people. Do they like it? Do they want to buy it? If no, what can you change? Okay, and now you have control over things.
Of course,
So that's one of the shifts I wanted to make, yeah. So therefore, yeah, I was happy to do acting and whatnot, but I wasn't really focusing on it. I was focusing on making this thing happen.
Cool. So this would have been a year in Australia after the move back. So this would have been mid 13, 14 by the sounds of it.
Yeah, I moved. Let's see. I left Hong Kong at the end of 2012 because I got back from the tour, and then we had just started dubbing this series, and it was going to take a year, and I had to stay in Hong Kong for it.
Yeah.
So because that was Gundam Age. I was one of the lead characters in Gundam Age, but we were dubbing it as they animated it. So we only got like 3 episodes a month or something.
Yeah, right.
But then it was going to take place over 10 months or something. But it was annoying. It wasn't enough money to live on, but I had to stay in Hong Kong long enough to get through the whole series.
Yeah,
like,
right.
Man. All right. So I actually went and did some day jobs and whatnot during that period just to stay alive. And those are other stories. We won't talk about those. But get through that, leave Hong Kong, go back to Adelaide, do my training in Adelaide and my prep in Adelaide. Move to Japan. And so I get to Japan, a very hard move, like I was saying. I moved over in October. So I went on the working holiday visa, which, Aussies can get.
Yep.
A lot of people apart from USA citizens can get it. It's a wonderful visa if you want to come to Japan and you're under 30. It's a great, great visa. So I recommend it. I remember I came over in October. We get to Christmas. Things have been so hard, and it's freezing in Japan at Christmas time, right? So I'm there with my giant freaking jacket on, shivering. I was dieting hardcore at the time, had a six-pack and everything, hardcore dieting, this vegan diet. And there was this dodgy supermarket that I bought my beans from. And so they had these Christmas cakes on sale, and my Christmas treat was I bought one of these Christmas cakes. I remember, I had not been able to get money out of the ATM. It had been such a nightmare. Just the whole move had been so freaking hard. I couldn't communicate. My Japanese was terrible. It was such a challenge. It's Christmas. I'm sitting there. I miss my family so much. And I bought myself one of these Christmas cakes from my dodgy supermarket. I'm sitting on a rail outside the supermarket. And I say to myself, Merry Christmas, Ladybeard. And I bite into this cake, and it's covered with icing sugar on the top. And they had not. It was such a cheap cake. They hadn't even stuck the sugar to the bread.
Oh no!
It was just loose icing sugar. So as soon as I bite into it, I go and I suck all the sugar into my nostrils. I start coughing everywhere. And that was my first Christmas in Japan. coughing up icing sugar in front of a Hamamatsu supermarket.
Oh my god! Alone, cold, struggling at Christmas. So that would have been that's obviously a time which you remember, not fondly, but it's a time you remember. So it must be quite a stark contrast to you've obviously had much better Christmases since you've been in Japan, by the sounds of it.
Well, so now here's what happened, right? So it was a matter of days after that I was introduced to my first manager in Japan.
Okay.
And so she was Japan's foremost photographer of cross-dressers at the time. So I'd actually done this one acting job with a bunch of other foreigners when I first got to Japan. And, they all knew each other. Like I say, the foreigner community is small and the actor community is small. So they all know each other. I'm the new guy in that group. So they're asking me, so what are you doing in Japan? How long have you been here and this kind of thing? And I'm like, yeah, I'm here to do this Ladybeard thing. So one of the guys said, it was a 2-day gig. After the first night, he'd gone home and researched me. And he was like, so I got a contact I think you might want to meet. She's photographs cross-dressers. And she's, that's kind of her thing she does all the time.
Yeah.
So I'm sure she'd be interested in photographing you. So I got introduced to my first manager. And it was kind of early January. She took my photos for the first time, yeah? And so took my photos. We put them up on Twitter. And they go viral.
Yeah, wow.
They go super viral, yeah. So at the time, she said she considered a photograph successful if it got 100 retweets. And her first photo with me got 5,000 retweets or something.
Wow.
So by her standards was this big...
Yeah,
at the time, I didn't have a Twitter account. So I didn't, everyone in Japan uses Twitter. I guess it's X now. Everyone in Japan used Twitter, but I wasn't on it myself. So these photos went viral. And so... so I said, at this point, she wasn't my manager. She was just taking photos of me and put these photos online. And we're like, oh. And so she's like, you should have a Twitter. And I'm like, all right. Figure out how to do that. She helps me make a Twitter because I don't know, I'm not bad with these things.
Yeah.
Helps me make a Twitter. straight away, I think we put up my next round of photos, and then within like a matter of weeks, had 30,000 followers or something.
Wow, that's incredible.
Yeah. Off the back of these photos. So then it was at that point I said, yo, do you want to be my manager? Because it seems like we're working well together. So, let's see, be good for you, it'd be good for me. We can develop the whole thing together. So started working with her. And so that started going really well. So now there's all this attention on me, and now there's all this demand for my shows. And now I start playing the show here, there, and everywhere, all over the country. So that's going great. Doing lots of shows. And then I was on the cover of this magazine called Metropolis, it's one of the only English street magazines in Tokyo.
Okay.
Yeah, there's, because, obviously most things are in Japanese, but there's like one free street magazine which services the foreign community, and it's called Metropolis. So I'd interviewed for that. I'd been put on the cover of that. So happy days. And so I'm on the cover of this magazine, and they have it at the airport. So what happens was there's this, unbeknownst to me, happening in somewhere I don't know about, there is a Chinese man who owns a Halloween costume manufacturing company in Japan, right? And he's getting off a plane. So he's at the airport, going to immigration or whatever, and he sees this magazine with me on the cover. He goes, what the hell is that? He takes the magazine, takes it back to his office, shows his staff. He's like, look at this nonsense. It's me standing there flexing in my pink and white bikini with my pigtails in and whatnot, my beard. And he's like, well, look at this guy. What's this all about? And they're like, yeah. This guy, Ladybeard, this foreigner. He's got to Japan recently. He's blowing up at the moment. And this dude says, bring him in here. Bring him in. I want to work with him. Bring him in. So we get contacted by this costume manufacturer, and he wants to have a meeting. So my first manager and we go in for this meeting. And I'm thinking, he's sitting, we're in this meeting, and he's saying, so I want to work with you. I'm like, all right.
Yep, cool.
Yep. I think he's going to say, I'll make like a line of your bikini costume, my bikini that I wrestle in. I'll make like a Halloween costume line of that, and we can sell it in the Halloween costume stores. This is what I'm thinking he's going to say, right?
Yeah.
Then he goes, I want to work with you. I just don't know what I want to do with you yet. I'm like, oh, all right. No worries. Okay, cool. So he was like, so I'll get back to you. So we leave that meeting. We don't know what's going on. We just leave. All right, very good. A month or so later, we get another call asking us to go back in for another meeting.
Yeah.
And we go on and we sit down, and he says, so you do this heavy metal thing, you do your cross-dressing and whatnot. I'm going to put you in a pop group with a pair of Japanese idols. And I'm like, what? I was expecting to be some deal to license my bikini.
Yeah.
And he's like, no, we're going to make a pop group, and you're going to be the center of this pop group, and there's going to be these two teenage Japanese girls next to you, and you're going to do your screaming thing, and they're going to sing, and all of you are going to dance. And I'm like, whoa, righty-ho. So that begins. This group gets made, and then we record and shoot the video for our first song, which was called Nippon Manju.
Yeah.
And then at I can't remember, the end of 2014 or something, that gets put on YouTube and blows up. So I think it was 3 days, 3 million views.
Wow.
Yeah. This is before TikTok, so 1 million views was a lot back
Yeah,
then.
no, even on YouTube, just getting to those numbers in this economy for YouTube, that's crazy.
Hard, right? Yeah. That's right. So 3 million in 3 days. So of course, that blows up. And now we are the golden children, and all this attention comes onto this group, and it's all over the world as well. It's Japan, lots of attention, but then everywhere else, also a lot of attention. My numbers on my social media just go whip, 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 and they just go brrr. So now it's up to like 100,000 or something on Twitter just off that one thing. Goes brr, 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 brr. It's funny because every time you open your phone, you see your numbers have clicked up like another 3,000 or something.
Yeah.
You put your phone away for 10 minutes, you open it again, it's clicked up another 2,000 or something. It's remarkable. It's an exciting time.
The dream of every content creator or cosplayer or YouTuber out there is just like, oh, I wish I could just open my phone and have those kind of numbers. That's crazy.
It's an exciting time. It's also, I wish I could go back again with the ability to read Japanese and be able to read the comments. The only word I could read was kawaii. Just every comment had the word kawaii in there, and then a bunch of other Japanese I didn't get. That was all I knew what was going on. People thought it was cute. But so then that blew up, and it's kind of a case of the rest is history. Now I've been doing this for 10 years. That was the point at which I could quit my day job.
Yeah.
And now I'm ladybearding full time. So lots of attention now, lots of shows, more demand for more songs, more videos. Wrestling, I get booked for a lot more wrestling shows now. And so when I say now, this is back in 2015.
Yeah.
So this whole thing happens and blows up. And then it's worldwide. It's been worldwide ever since. So Japan, and then around the Western world as well. Everyone who saw this video is picked up and played, by news outlets all over the world. People would write to me in broken English from France saying, "So that your video very famous in France," and then it's being played on like France 24 or whatever.
That's wild.
Yeah, it was crazy. So that happened. We started touring the world and whatnot, and then also with my solo show, I started touring the world and whatnot. And then this is very interesting. We were just sitting in Japan. These two things happened simultaneously without us meaning for them to be linked in any way. We were sitting in Japan before Nippon Manju happened, doing our thing in Japan. And so we had a Japanese client we were working with, and he used to live in Shanghai for a while, right? So he spoke a bit of Mandarin, and I spoke a bit of Mandarin, so we went back and forth on this a bit. And he goes, so I was looking at your Weibo account. Weibo is like Twitter for
China, Chinese,
right? Yep. Yeah. Because I was looking at your Weibo account, and I'm like, I don't have a Weibo account. What are you talking about? He goes, yes, you do. And it turns out that people had taken my photos off the Japanese internet and gone and made Weibo accounts with it.
Oh my goodness,
internet. Yeah. And Ladybeard was super famous on Weibo without me even knowing it, just from my photos being yanked from our social media and put up over there. So we're like, he's showing us. He goes, "Yep, there are currently 2,000 fake Ladybeard accounts on Weibo."
Jesus.
I'm like, what? So we're like, okay. So it's like, so you should make an official Weibo. Well, all right, so we make the official Weibo. Of course, Ladybeard has been taken, so it's Ladybeard with 6 Ds at the end. That's the name of the official account. Ladybeard, we make the Weibo account, and for a week, just endless messages in both Chinese and English and Japanese. Is this really you? Is this really you? Is this really you? Is this really you? Yeah. 1 week, I think it was 100,000 followers.
That's incredible. So
that was crazy.
It's really just kind of taken off since you found your niche, since you found what you love to do, and you found the market that also really loves what you do and wants to spread it everywhere. I think the biggest thing to take away from this is, it obviously hasn't been smooth sailing since day one. It's been something that's just been up and down, the biggest roller coaster that you can kind of think of at this point. And obviously, the story's still going. You've got, you're still doing music, you're still doing wrestling. As we mentioned before, you've got a podcast that you're running as well. So at this point in time, just kind of, where are your creative outlets? What are kind of your main focuses in 2024, like at the moment?
2024. So everything we just spoke about was, from the year 1998 through to 2015.
Yeah.
We're gonna skip the next 10 years, go straight to 2024. 2024. So of course we have the podcast was going well, and I DJ as well. Interestingly, 2 days from now I go back to DJ in Hong Kong.
Whoa.
So I return to my old home, which will be wonderful. DJing as well, and doing my solo show. But of course, the main thing we're focusing on at the moment is my group, BABYBEARD.
BABYBEARD.
Right there. Yay! So my first group was me and the 2 Japanese girls. We made Nippon Manju. That went great. That first group came apart just due to the politics and all the nonsense and show business is what it is. That came apart, but then everyone wanted to see that formation again. They wanted me with the 2 girls. So once we were in a position politically in Japanese show business where we could do that, we did the same thing. That's my group, BABYBEARD. So me, with the adorable Suzu and Mari, I scream, they sing, we all dance. It's fantastic. So please go onto the internet, look up BABYBEARD. We're on all the places, BABYBEARD_Japan. I, of course, am Ladybeard_Japan. Please click follow. Please click the like. Please write kawaii in Japanese, because it's the only word I can read still. So that way, that you enjoy what you see.
It's fantastic. Thank you so much. I'd just big shout out to John from High Festival for getting us to talk, because I learned so much about your history today. I thought, okay, this is going to be a fun little story, like maybe it goes from A to B, but it went A, B, C, D, E, F. It went all over the place.
Because it does this, it's quite a story. So therefore, now here's what's interesting as well. I appreciate you giving me the platform and letting me at my own pace and with my own logic go through all this. Because most of the time when you do an interview, it's what happened at the very start of this interview when I've got 20 seconds to condense that 20 years worth of nonsense. and just get that all out, right? So I appreciate you, man. Thank you for letting me go through that slowly and kind of take my time with things and jump around the story and whatnot.
No, honestly, I would give you even more time if the platform itself allowed me to record longer and send it out. But no, thank you for sharing your story with us. And we just had a discussion before. I was also, a lot of things I wanted to ask you today, because I didn't honestly think that, let's go through your whole life story, your whole career. And we'll also have room for the questions, but as anybody who I've kept it on the down low, obviously, but anyone I had to talk to is like, I might get this interview chance to interview Ladybeard. And there's obviously a lot of people around the world, not just in Australia, but idol groups around the world who look up to you and your work and what you do. And they obviously want to know not just your story, but any kind of advice that you'd give to those kinds of people, and what you kind of do in their shoes. And I think that's going to be a whole avenue, a whole nother topic for another time. And that another time is going to be next week. So thank you very much to Ladybeard for sharing with us their epic adventure, their story, all the way from Australia to Hong Kong, everywhere in between, up until now, where they're currently living in Japan. What we didn't get the chance to speak about, obviously, was their idol activities, their singing activities, what they actually get up to now and how they built that foundation in Japan. So what actually ended up happening is we spoke for a good hour and a bit, as you can see, just about their adventures up till now. But we ended up vibing for a whole nother hour just speaking about idol activities, what goes into it, how to make the most of it, just having fun, how to build your career, build your brand as an idol. So if that's the kind of stuff that you're wanting to learn, wanting to listen to, we did get the chance to talk about that. There's going to be another episode that I'm going to be dropping in the JustBeCos podcast next week. So if you're an aspiring idol and you're wanting to learn a lot more about the industry and get some really good advice from Ladybeard themselves, be sure to tune in next week, because it's a really good episode. But for anybody who has tuned in, again, all the way from the start, all the way to here, again, thank you very much for all of the support with this little podcast of ours. We're going to keep plugging away, and as usual, we're going to catch you again next week with another Ladybeard episode. So, again, thank you so much. We'll catch you next week. Bye!